The sound of wedding bells echoed through the grand ballroom of the Monteverde estate, where chandeliers sparkled like diamonds above a crowd of high society guests. To anyone watching, it was the perfect union, the merger of two powerful families. But behind the smiles, behind the music and champagne, two hearts sat in silent misery. Isabella hardly stood in front of the mirror, her reflection trembling as tears welled in her eyes. She was barely 23, soft-spoken and kind, the daughter of a struggling businessman who had just lost everything. Her father's last request before his heart failed was a desperate one: marry the son of his former business partner, and secure the family's survival. That man was Adrian Monteverde, 28 years old, heir to an empire, and as cold as the marble walls that surrounded him. Adrian hadn't wanted this marriage. To him, Isabella represented everything he hated: manipulation, pity, and obligation. He had agreed to it only to save face, and because his father had demanded it. When he saw her walking down the aisle, dressed in white lace, her hands trembling, he thought, "She's beautiful, but I'll never love her." The ceremony ended with polite smiles, empty vows, and a cold kiss. That night, the silence between them was deafening. Adrian poured himself a drink, still in his suit, and stared out the window. "You can have your own room," he said sharply without turning to her. "We'll play the part for our families, but don't expect me to be your husband." Isabella nodded quietly, her throat tight. "I didn't ask for this either," she whispered. But her voice was barely audible. For weeks, their marriage existed only on paper. She woke up early to make breakfast, he left for meetings without a word. She watered the roses his mother once planted, while he drowned himself in work. Every time their eyes met, it was like glass shattering, too fragile, too sharp. But then came the night that changed everything. It was nearly midnight when Adrian returned home, exhausted and tense. He had just come from a gala where everyone praised his perfect marriage. He hated every moment of it. But when he walked through the door, he heard a sound, faint, like music. Following it, he found Isabella in the music room, playing the grand piano softly under the moonlight. She didn't see him standing there. Her fingers danced across the keys, filling the cold house with warmth. Her eyes were closed, tears glistening on her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "For you, Papa." Adrian froze. He hadn't known she could play. He hadn't known she was mourning her father still, or that she played to feel less alone. He watched her quietly for a long time. Then, when she finished and turned around, startled, their eyes met, and something in him broke. For the first time, he didn't see a stranger. He saw a woman who had lost everything, yet still found grace in the ruins. The days after that were different. Adrian began noticing her little habits, how she always left the light on in the library for him when he worked late. How she smiled at the staff and remembered their names. How she refused to touch his money, even though she could have. One morning, he found her sketchbook left open on the patio. Inside were portraits, of his parents, his childhood home, even of him, drawn with a kind of tenderness that made his chest ache. He confronted her gently that night. "Why would you draw me?" She blushed. "Because I wanted to remember the man I married, even if he doesn't see me." Something inside Adrian shifted. He realized that she had never wanted his wealth, only his kindness. And he hadn't given her even that. But the moment of truth came a few nights later. A thunderstorm rolled in, and Isabella was in the kitchen when she suddenly collapsed. Adrian rushed to her side, panic flooding through him as she fainted. When the doctor arrived, the truth left him speechless. Isabella had been sick for months. She had known before the wedding but kept it a secret, not wanting pity or to burden him with guilt. That night, as she lay unconscious, Adrian sat beside her bed, holding her hand. His heart felt like it was being torn apart. "You're not just some deal I was forced into," he whispered. "You're everything I didn't know I needed." He stayed there all night. When she woke in the morning, she saw him asleep in the chair, his fingers still intertwined with hers. When she stirred, his eyes opened, red and tired but filled with something she hadn't seen before: love. From that day forward, Adrian changed. He canceled his overseas meetings, spent time with her, and learned how to make her laugh. He brought her flowers, not the expensive kind, but the wild daisies she once said she loved. Months passed, and the house that once felt like a cage became a home. On their first anniversary, Adrian surprised her by taking her back to the piano room, the same place where he had first heard her play. He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was not jewelry, but a folded letter. Her father's handwriting. "I found it among the papers after he passed," Adrian said softly. "He wrote it for you, and for me." Isabella opened it, tears streaming down her face. It read, "If you're reading this, my dear Isabella, then you're starting a new chapter. I hope your husband learns what I already know, that your heart is the greatest treasure a man could ever have." When she looked up, Adrian was on one knee. "I was blind before," he said, voice breaking. "But if you'll let me, I want to love you for real this time." Isabella didn't speak. She simply threw her arms around him and cried against his chest. From that night on, Adrian Monteverde was never the same man again. He no longer despised the marriage that once felt like a trap. Instead, he thanked fate every day for the woman he was once too proud to love. And in the silence of the Monteverde mansion, if you passed by the music room late at night, you could still hear a soft melody, the sound of forgiveness, love, and second chances. Moral: sometimes love doesn't come wrapped in choice or perfection. Sometimes it begins with resentment, grows through pain, and blossoms when two broken souls finally learn to see each other, not through pride, but through compassion.